I'm working part-time like crazy, but it's just pocket change. If it weren't for your car, things wouldn't have come to this. What I had suppressed in my heart has finally burst out. My name is Lisa. I'm a 40-year-old homemaker. Even though it's part-time, I work 5 days a week. My husband, William, is 43. It's a small company, but he holds the title of sales manager. Our son, Richard, was born shortly after we got married. He's an 11th grade baseball boy. Bright and kind, always thinking of his parents. With just the three of us, we were leading a reasonably happy life. But there's one thing that's bothering me. William is an extreme vintage car enthusiast. Vintage cars, you see, are different from ordinary classic or old cars. They're special cars, clearly distinguished by the era they were manufactured in. The term vintage comes from the concept of vintage wine. William always talks about vintage cars, but to me, it's just a means of transportation. As long as the car runs safely, that's all I care about. Even I, who think of it that way, couldn't help but memorize his explanations, as he passionately repeats the same stories over and over again. I'm already fed up with all the car talk, but if I don't nod along, he becomes obviously displeased. The atmosphere becomes unbearable, so I reluctantly engage in the conversation. And then, without any consultation or warning, William suddenly replaced the car when our son Richard entered elementary school. Buying a car without any discussion was shocking enough. But what surprised me even more was the price. $58,000? Isn't this a used car? That's an amount you could use to buy a brand new one. It's a vintage car, so of course it's going to cost that much. But look at it. Isn't it magnificent, this form? It's rare for it to be in such beautiful condition. You're spending that kind of money without any discussion or planning? What on earth are you thinking? I was so taken aback by the sudden turn of events that I raised my voice in anger. In response to me, William said calmly, Now, don't get so angry, Lisa. You're good at managing the household budget, right? That is where your skills shine. I was disappointed by William's nonchalant words. I couldn't help but let out a big sigh. Even though it's a small company, I don't think William's salary as sales manager is low by any means. However, with our son just starting elementary school, thinking about his education expenses and our retirement funds, it was far from a situation where we could laugh it off. We needed to come up with a plan as soon as possible. Just as I was thinking this, something happened. William placed his hand on my shoulder as I pondered. Well, now that Richard has started elementary school, how about trying a part-time job? It might help bring in some extra cash. Look for something in your free time. Hearing William's casual suggestion, I felt like I was about to explode in anger at that moment. But I knew that if I did explode, it would affect William. It's always like that. William remains calm and diffuses my explosions. Suppressing my anger, I said, Fine, I'll do it. But if I take up a part-time job, it means less time for housework, so you should help out a bit too. I made the request, and with a nonchalant expression, William replied, Nah, even if I help, it'll just increase your workload, Lisa. I'm counting on you. I love you. Always like this. Whenever he says I love you, I become speechless. He knows that, and still says those words. Afterward, by chance, there was a company nearby that was hiring office staff, and I was hired there. Even though it was a part-time job, working 5 days a week after a long time was quite tough. But the pay turned out to be better than I had expected. I had worked in an office job before we got married, so I could handle work at a fairly fast pace, even as a newcomer. Thanks to that, I ended up with a monthly income of around $1.5K. I had thought it would be nice if it's a few $100s a month. I secretly felt proud. Maybe William will be a bit surprised, I thought as I showed him my pay stub. $1.5K, not bad, but considering my salary, it's just pocket change for our child. Well, I guess that's how it is with part-time jobs. William said with a smirk, belittling my part-time job. It was an utterly foolish thing to say, especially for someone like William. with an above-average salary as a sales manager. He acted so superior without helping any household chores. He probably didn't know that the labor value of housewives with children could amount to an annual income of $60,000. I've thought many times about seriously demanding it for once. Contrary to my feelings, William continued to replace cars one after another before paying off the loan. For this, William said, "You won't find vintage cars in such good condition anymore. It has the perfect form." He did this 4 times in the past 10 years. It's absurd. With each car replacement, the monthly payments kept increasing. I extended my part-time job hours, worked on my days off, but it was still not enough to keep up. It was a never-ending cycle. Chasing after repayments that seemed to never end, I was completely worn out, physically and emotionally. One day I had some trouble at work, which was rare, and my return home was significantly delayed. I messaged Richard, "I'm sorry, but dinner will be late tonight. I'll be home as soon as I finish." In response, Richard replied like this, "It's okay, Mom. I'll make it. But more importantly, be safe on your way home." What a kind and reliable son he had become. It's a good thing he didn't take after William. Filled with such emotions, I returned home. Normally William, who comes home late, had come home first today. "What took you so long?" "Sorry, I got delayed dealing with a problem." "Don't make a part-time job homemaker deal with issues. Not a decent company, I'd say." I was infuriated by his comment, considering that he knew next to nothing about the company or my job. "You don't need to say it like that. It's just today." To which William unbelievably responded, "You're desperate for some pocket change, but your earnings won't make any difference." I couldn't contain the feelings I had been holding inside any longer after hearing that. Pocket change? What a thing to say. That money is for paying off the loan for the car you bought. You keep replacing it over and over again like a fool, even though it's still perfectly fine to drive. I'm working so hard to pay it off, and you have the nerve to say such things. I finally let it out, raising my voice. I couldn't bear it anymore. Then, in a calm voice, William said, "What's a part-timer like you doing, making snide remarks? In that case, I could stop paying rent and our child's tuition. Would that be fine?" I was genuinely astounded by my own husband. Certainly, I thought William's salary was decent, compared to average. But when we considered various things, like our current apartment that we had decided to splurge on, Richard's education expenses and savings for retirement, it was impossible for it to be enough. I did consider stopping the car payments, but "If you do something like that, I'll divorce you right away." With just that one statement, William knew I would be rendered speechless. That's probably why he could behave so insolently. Honestly, if it came to divorce, I wouldn't know what to do. I didn't want to let go of Richard, but I had no confidence in raising him on my own, especially when he aspired to go to college. If it weren't for the car, I grew increasingly resentful of the vintage cars. I found myself thinking about it more and more. One day at work, Lisa, what's wrong?" I was suddenly called out by a senior colleague at the office, which startled me. "Oh, sorry, I was lost in thought." "You've been like this quite often lately. It's not like you, Lisa." "I'm sorry. I'll focus more on my work." "Is there something bothering you, maybe? If you're comfortable, you can talk to me." Thomas is my senior colleague at work. He is a full-time employee who's passionate about his job. His face may look a bit rough, but he's kind and very considerate, a reliable senior. During lunch break on the rooftop of the company, we sat side by side and talked. Thomas is so kind that I think he made it easy for me to start the conversation, but he began by sharing his own story. "You know, I got divorced 2 years ago because of my wife's infidelity. I have a high schooler and a middle schooler, daughters. I ended up taking custody of them, so now it's just me and my kids." Thomas had it even tougher than me. I felt a strong connection and started to talk to him seriously. "Well, the thing is, my husband has been hinting at a divorce. I don't even know what to do." Is there a reason for that?" "My husband is really into cars. But not just any cars, vintage cars that cost a fortune. We always end up fighting about it. He buys them without consulting me, and it's impossible for us to pay for them with just his salary. So I started working part-time to help with the payments. But the other day when I showed him my pay stub for the first time, he said, "You're earning nothing but peanuts." Isn't that awful? I'm working hard in my own way, and to top it off, he said, "If you can't listen to me, let's get a divorce." He doesn't help with the household chores at all, and he neglects Richard too. Thomas listened attentively and sympathetically, nodding along as I poured out everything I hadn't been able to share with anyone before. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was grateful, but I suddenly felt embarrassed and gave a shy smile. "I'm sorry for talking about this." In a serious tone, Thomas asked, "If you were to get a divorce from your husband, do you think you could manage living with Richard?" That had been my biggest concern, so I answered honestly. Honestly, it would be a bit tough. Richard wants to go to college, and I want to support him. But with my current part-time job, it doesn't seem possible. As I spoke, the clock struck 1 p.m., and the office bell rang, signaling the end of our lunch break. I stood up, ready to head back to the office, and thanked Thomas. He had a kind but slightly worried look in his eyes, which I noticed as he focused on me. I felt somewhat relieved, but the reality of the situation was harsh. Richard, who was usually cheerful and playful, approached me with a solemn expression. "Mom, there's something I need to talk to you about." I braced myself, alarmed by his unusual demeanor. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" "Well, today, on my way home from cram school, I saw Dad's car. It's such a rare vintage car that I couldn't mistake it. So I got closer, and there was a woman in the passenger seat. They were talking like they were close." My vision went blank as I heard Richard's words. But looking at Richard, who had tears welling up in his eyes, I knew what I had to do. "Thank you for telling me. Leave the rest to me. You don't need to worry, Richard," I said, gently touching Richard's cheek, and he nodded slightly. As I looked at Richard, I struggled to hold back tears that threatened to overflow. I couldn't bear it any longer. On a weekend day that week, I decisively knocked on the door of a detective agency. The person who attended to me was a calm and gentle woman who listened to my story with great seriousness. Honestly, the investigation fees were not cheap, but I didn't mind. I was willing to cut back on expenses later. Filled with the determination for revenge against William, who had brought misery to both me and Richard, I had no doubts, and I decided to stop paying the car loan. Even though I had been using my income to make the payments, both the bank account and the loan were in William's name. I transferred all the remaining cash from the bank account to another one, ensuring there would be no automatic deductions. Of course, there were no direct debits, so I received a reminder notice at home. However, I threw it in the trash. Of course, I hid it deep in the kitchen's garbage bin so that William wouldn't find it. The second month, the third month, and beyond, no deductions were made, and I discarded all the reminder letters that arrived. As I cut the reminder letters with scissors, I couldn't help but smirk with a sense of satisfaction. Around the same time, I received a call from the detective agency I had hired for the investigation, informing me that the report was ready. I quickly examined it, and the contents unmistakably confirmed the affair. The other woman seemed to be a member of a vintage car enthusiast club. She was the typical rich man's daughter who worked at her father's company. The fine details no longer mattered to me. Instead, this was rather convenient. I eagerly anticipated how much alimony I could claim in the divorce trial, now that various pieces of evidence had been gathered. With all the evidence in hand, I visited a law firm. A female lawyer recommended by the detective agency appeared to be an expert in divorce cases. After hearing about William's outrageous behavior, which seemed inhuman, the lawyer sympathized with me and offered her advice. "Don't worry anymore. Leave it to me. Let's make sure your husband faces the consequences." With those words, she encouraged me strongly, and so after stopping the car loan payments, around 5 months had passed when I finally received what I had been waiting for. It was a large envelope. I casually placed it on the table and waited for William to return. "Welcome back, William. It seems like some documents have arrived." I was desperately holding back my grin while preparing dinner in the kitchen. When William opens these documents, he probably won't be able to focus on anything else. As I predicted, he came in with a surprisingly loud voice and shouted at me. "Lisa, what the hell is going on? You haven't been paying the car loan for 5 months. "Oh, come on. Didn't you say I don't have to pay?" "No one would take such a joke seriously. I'm saying they're coming to repossess the car. How could you do this?" "But it has nothing to do with me. I don't really need a car like that. It's not convenient for me to drive." "This is no joke. Pay it right now, or we're really getting a divorce." "Well, I think that might be for the best, so write up the divorce papers." Every time he threatened divorce before, I couldn't say anything and just followed William's lead. He probably expected me to obey as usual when it came to divorce. But I wasn't falling for that anymore. Right in front of William, I handed him the divorce papers instead of dinner. My part was already filled out. All that was left was for William to write his part. Even William, who usually made sarcastic remarks in a calm voice, seemed surprised by this. His eyes widened, and he seemed flustered. I couldn't help but smirk. "Why aren't you writing it? You're the one who brought it up, William. Write it already." "Hold on, Lisa. Let's discuss this calmly." "I am calm. I've already made all the necessary preparations." "Can you say that, Lisa? With a salary of around $1,500? You can't even sustain a decent life. Do you understand? You're just a housewife with a part-time job." "Oh dear, you're acting so high and mighty. Too bad for you. I've become a full-time employee. My salary has increased significantly, and I can easily live on my own, even after a divorce." "What nonsense are you talking about? Richard is about to go to college. Yet, with no income, Richard won't follow you, Lisa." "Dad, I'll stick with Mom. I don't want to be with a dad who has caused so much suffering for Mom and betrayed her." Standing there where Richard should have been in his room was Richard himself. With a face filled with anger that was completely unlike his usual smile, he glared at William. Since even Richard had sided with me, I made one last stand, albeit nervously. "This ungrateful child. Fine, do as you please. Don't come crying to me for help later." Even William, who usually appeared calm, wrote the divorce papers with a trembling hand and an angry tone in his voice. After confirming that he had filled in all the sections, I took the divorce papers. With a dissatisfied expression and heavy breathing, William glared at me. I was ready to deliver the final blow. "Well then, I'll submit this tomorrow. I'll also be leaving this house, and I expect you to pay alimony and child support for the divorce trial, which should arrive around tomorrow via registered mail to your company, so please make arrangements for that." "I'm not going to pay for that. There's no reason to pay in the first place." "Oh my, do you think I don't know? How much do you underestimate people?" I chuckled softly and handed William another envelope I had prepared. Upon checking its contents, William turned pale and started trembling. Inside the envelope were numerous pieces of evidence photos and a report about the affair, all collected by the detective agency. "Jennifer, was it? She's a beautiful woman, isn't she? Perfect for you. Marrying the president's daughter and living a wealthy life, it's ideal, right? I'll let you go so you can have your beloved vintage cars. In return, I'll be claiming alimony in the divorce trial. Since she's the president's daughter, I think I'll ask for a little extra. After all, you facilitated the deal, didn't you? If she's grateful, maybe her parents will pay up." Upon hearing that, William truly lost his composure. "Stop. Please spare me that. If you do that, I'm in big trouble too. I might get fired from the company. Please, I'm begging you. I'll do as you say. Forgive me." I no longer heard William's voice. I completely ignored him and continued. "Richard, I'm really sorry for all of this. Mom will do her best from now on to ensure you can attend the college you want to. Let's work together, the two of us." I had made up my mind to move forward. Richard supported me in this decision. With his support, I believed I could face the challenges ahead. We subsequently moved to a rented apartment we had arranged in advance. Richard smiled and said, "Let's do our best together." With that smile, I felt I could persevere. As a full-time employee, I sometimes came home late due to overtime. However, Richard helped with the household chores during his busy study hours, and it was a great relief. Later on, the alimony from William's affair partner for the divorce trial was scheduled to be transferred in a lump sum. It was probably paid by Jennifer's dad, but I didn't concern myself with that. Combining my increased income as a full-time employee and the alimony from the divorce trial, it seemed that Richard's college expenses would be manageable. However, the payment of alimony from William for the divorce trial seemed to be more complicated. In the end, his car was repossessed. William, who was about to divorce me, couldn't make the payments anymore. Especially since the other party turned out to be the president's daughter from a business partner company, and he was demoted from his position as sales manager. Even if he promised to pay in installments, the payments would probably be delayed. I decided to take proactive steps and initiate wage garnishment procedures. He wouldn't be able to afford even a used car anymore, but that was none of my concern. I thought it served him right, to experience the suffering we had endured. Afterward, the company recognized my efforts and finally gave me the title of senior. With that promotion came a slight increase in my salary. I was grateful to the company for their warm support, especially Thomas, who continued to look after me in various ways. In appreciation, I decided to make lunch for Thomas every day, as a token of my gratitude for his ongoing help. Today, as we sat on the rooftop, spreading out our lunch boxes side by side, Thomas muttered softly, "How about inviting my daughters and Richard over for a meal at my place sometime?"